Beautiful music there. That's the saxophone, the soprano sax of one Dr. George Wolfe, who has joined me here, Jim Walsh, in the Wapahani studio here at WITT. Dr. Wolfe is the current Green Party candidate for the Indiana Secretary of State for the election coming up here in Indiana. Welcome to the studio, Dr. Wolfe.
Well, thank you very much.
Wolfe with an E.
Wolfe with an E.
Yeah, to make sure people get that right off the bat.
It's great to be here.
Heard a little Eric Satie at the beginning. These are your recordings of
That's
you
right.
and Paul Riley on guitar.
Paul Riley on guitar. That's right. Classical guitar.
To introduce our listeners to you, you are the Professor Emeritus and former Director of the Peace and Conflict Studies at Ball State.
Center for Peace and Conflict Studies.
The Center, I'm sorry. Okay. And you're also Professor of History of Conflict Class of Nonviolence and Conflicts.
As part of my duties as the Director of the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies was teaching a class in the history and philosophy of nonviolence.
Okay.
And that's what that was, yeah.
And you've been involved in your profession at Ball State for some 32 years.
32 years I taught there before I retired. That's right.
Now all of a sudden you're a candidate for Secretary of State.
Yeah.
You're like Bill Clinton and his saxophone.
Retirement's full of surprises, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
always say maybe, I don't know if people want another saxophonist in the White House, but, you know.
Well, probably better than what we have. Anyway, so I gave away some of my politics there. We want to discuss your candidacy. We also want to hear a little bit more of your music.
Sure.
But first of all, I'd like to find out and let our listeners know what the heck is the Green Party. I mean, I've heard about the Green Party for years, and in particular with their parliamentary wins in Europe.
That's right.
In England.
Had a lot of progress in Europe.
And recently they did very well in Bavaria.
That's right.
Yeah, they got like close to 18% of the votes in Bavaria, even with Angela Merkel.
Yes.
Part of that. Well, she wasn't part of the Green Party, but she was one of the opponents to that. So what do you know about the Green Party? I'm sure you know more than I do.
Well, the Green Party started in 1984.
1984. Internationally or just in the United States?
In America, in the United States. And it started as an environmental kind of movement. Right. And then gradually it changed and broadened and became a political party. And like you mentioned already, it has had more success in Europe, perhaps, but it's gaining a lot of success in the United States. There are Green Party candidates in many other states. Ohio, there's a Green Party candidate running for governor.
Wow. Okay.
And
on the ballot.
On the ballot. In California, there's a prominent Green Party candidate that is running for, I believe, the House of Representatives, and looks like he has a good chance of winning, actually. And
would that be the first? Would that the House of Representatives, the United States House of Representatives?
Yes, that would probably be the first Green Party candidate to actually hold a seat in the House.
Now, there's probably been some mayors around the country that have won,
yes, other more local offices. Yeah,
okay,
Green Party has had success. Green Party has ballot access in all but 6 states in the United States, but Indiana is one in which it does not have ballot access, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get ballot access.
Okay, and how do we do that?
Well, to get that,
how do you do that?
Yeah, they make it real difficult in Indiana. The 2 major parties. They, for example, I had to get 26,699 signatures on a petition.
26,699
signatures.
27,000.
Basically, yeah. And you really have to get more than that because they often throw some of them out because some people don't write clearly or whatever.
Wow.
You know. So you might wind up having to get 30,000 signatures or more.
Did you line up all the students at Ball State? No, I'm just teasing. I'm curious how you got that. But,
well, we didn't get.
You didn't. To get on the ballot.
to get on the ballot. If I were running as a Republican or a Democrat, I'd only need 4,500.
Really?
Yeah. So there's a huge disparity. Just difference there, and that was the case in other states. In Pennsylvania, for example, that was the case, but they took it to court, and through legal action, they had that number reduced to make it equal.
Who took it to court? The Green Party?
Green Party.
In Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so there's been success in making it, in challenging the highly restrictive ballot access laws.
Any idea where they came up with the 27,000 number?
I think it means 2%.
2%.
2% of the vote. I have to get, see, if you don't get the petition signatures, you can still run as a write-in candidate.
Which is what you'll be doing.
Which is what I'm doing. And if I get 2% of the vote, then we'll have ballot access.
Okay, and for right 4 years, you said.
Pardon me?
For 4 years.
But yes, that's right.
Okay.
And if
2% of the total vote.
2% of the total vote. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so is that reachable, you think?
Well, I'm polling at 4%.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're really hopeful that we can get to 2%. But people have to remember they do have to write me in, and that the office that they have to write me in for is Secretary of State.
Now let's go over that. Mm-hmm. People have to write you in now. As I recall, there's like 2 different kinds of voting logistics in Indiana. One is pure paper ballot.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And one is what, the screen, the computer screen?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So tell our listeners how they can write you in either situation.
Yeah. Well, on the paper ballot, it's quite simple. It lists the candidates, and then there's a line underneath that says write in.
Okay.
Or other.
So you would check that little circle or whatever,
that's
or
right.
fill it in.
And then you'd write my name in. That would be how you do it on a paper ballot.
George Wolfe, W-O-L-F-E.
That's right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then
they had to put doctor in there.
They could. Someone asked me if I'm really a doctor, and I always say in some states. Yeah.
In some states, okay.
But
that's good.
Yeah, my doctorate, by the way, is in higher education administration from Indiana University, but I have my master's degree in performance from Indiana University School of Music, where I studied with Eugene Rousseau as a saxophonist there. Mm-hmm. Okay. But that's us on the side there. Going back to the ballot, if you're going to vote electronically, then you get to the page where it says the Secretary of State, and you would then push the button which says Other or Write In, and then a keyboard would come up on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Just like on your cell phone or something, or your computer, laptop,
on your iPad or
yeah. And it might come tablet. On either side. It might be a keyboard that comes on either side, or it might come up from the bottom, depending on the machine. But then you type in my name, and then you'd push record.
Okay.
And that's how you'd write me in if it were an electronic voting machine.
Have we covered the 2 different situations?
Much, yeah. I know there are some punch ballots, where you have to the old-fashioned way.
Okay.
But that would be the same. You'd punch, write in, and write my name in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's play another piece of your music from the CD, and then when we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit more about, in general, the Green Party. We'll maybe hear a little more music, and then talk about your agenda as Secretary of State.
Right.
So what are we going to hear now? Track 3. Are we into track 3 here, George? This is...
Can be. I gave you several of them. So.
Okay, this is from the Tableau de Provence by...
Paul Maurice.
And this is La Bumiano. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Right.
And the pianist is Holly Hanauer.
That's right.
George Wolfe on WITT. You're good. Your alto sax playing there.
Oh, good.
You had the soprano on our first track there. Yeah, that's. First of all, let's talk about your CDs here before we get away from that.
Sure.
This is the CD that was recorded. You said at Ball State, and
it's actually a collection of several different performances.
Okay.
Some live and some in the studio.
So assembled.
And it's assembled over a period of several years. That's right. Mm-hmm.
And does that have a title?
And the title is Le Saxophone Mélodieux, or the Melodious Saxophone. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I can't read that scribbling.
Okay, and
no, it's beautiful. It's nice.
And my sequel CD to that is Le Saxophone Extraordinaire, which is the extraordinary saxophone, and that is a CD that again is a collection of performances, which I've given over the years, and that was released about 3 years after that one. Mm-hmm.
And then those are available how for our listeners to purchase?
Yeah, those available through Arizona University Recordings.
Arizona University Recordings.
Mm-hmm. And you go to the website for that, or you can just go to or email me, and I can I can send copies.
And your email is
GeorgeWolfe30 at gmail.com.
George Wolfe 30. That's Wolf with an E.
Mm-hmm.
At where? At what?
Gmail.com.
Mm-hmm. Now, before the music, we teased the fact that we wanted to talk a little bit more, Dr. Wolfe, about, in general, about the Green Party. Mm-hmm. You said it began in 1984. It was started in California? Maybe? Sounds like something that would start out in California. Yeah,
I'm not exactly sure.
And it was mostly dedicated to the environment, ecology.
But over time, you see, it's broadened, and it has basically, we say the Green Party has 4 pillars.
Okay.
And the 4 pillars are grassroots democracy, ecological wisdom, social justice, and nonviolence.
Grassroots democracy. That's interesting. What were the others now?
Ecological wisdom.
Ecological wisdom.
Social justice.
I like social justice.
And nonviolence. And I'm running on the Green Party because I agree with those values. Also, as a Green Party member, I don't take contributions from corporations or PACs or special interest groups, only from private individuals. And so I agree with that value because I think big money is corrupted politics.
Is that universal with all
the Green Party members?
Green Party candidates?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Green Party candidates, yeah.
I know we, when in the 2016 election, we featured some of the, what do you want to call it, interactions that Dr. Jill Stein, who was running for president on the Green Party ticket, when she would kind of jump in when the other 2 folks were debating, she would jump in with her comments on whatever question the moderators asked. It was kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. Then I think later on we ran an hour of her something, I can't remember what it was. It was something to do with the election, obviously.
Yeah. But see, I think it's really important that we get big money out of politics. I think, it has too much corrupting influence in terms of what people.
Farther away.
Well, farther away.
Yeah.
Too many in terms of what the candidates follow. In other words, I can vote my conscience. I can make a decision based on my conscience, not based on my bankroll. I've run my campaign throughout the entire state. And if you go to my website, you'll see all the things I've been doing, speeches and radio interviews, and I have 6 platform videos, 2-minute platform videos which people can watch and so forth. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter. I've done all that with my campaign committee.
And how do people to get to that?
Well, first of all, let me say I've done all that on a budget of less than $5,000.
Wow.
And it shows you, although all the other candidates are tens and thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's just not necessary today. You know, I've got my message out, and that's.
So obviously,
I feel very good that I am not beholden to large special interest groups.
So obviously one of the platforms of the Green Party would probably be limits on
absolutely
expenses.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you're talking about
campaign
governors and mayors
reform
of New York,
That's
where they're
right.
doing $100 million and stuff. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. We think it's my feeling that I'm running not only because I want to be Secretary of State, I want to win, but I'm running to contribute to the conversation, to the political conversation, and I'm trying to apply what we say in higher education is the marketplace of ideas. Apply that to the political arena, and so we can sort of break down this highly adversarial, negative culture, political culture. And focus on ideas and solutions and move things collectively. With candidates can contribute these ideas, voters can contribute these ideas. We discuss them and decide on what's best to move the state forward collectively.
Okay.
And that's the way I think the political culture should be. I'm oriented towards that because as director of Center for Peace and Conflict Studies, I was trained as a mediator, and so I have a lot of experience bringing people together on common ground and in ways that you can build trust and cooperation. And I think that's what we need in the political environment today. We need candidates contributing positive solutions, being a part of the solution, not a part of the problem, so to speak, and move the state forward in ways that we can all collectively contribute to progressive ideas.
Well, and I noticed when Dr. Stein was speaking and her dialogue, it's very similar to what you're talking about now. And I don't recall what kind of vote she got, what percentage, but if you get 2% in Indiana, then the Green Party can be on the next ballot.
That's right.
The next 4 years of ballots,
That's
whatever
right.
that involves.
That's right.
Let's take another break and listen to a bit more music, Doctor. We're going to hear track number 13 from your album that you brought in, your CD, and that is the music of Walter Hartley?
Walter S. Hartley?
Walter S. Hartley. And this is the Presto from his double concerto for alto sax and tuba. Who's doing tuba is Harvey Phillips.
Harvey Phillips is on tuba. That's
and
right.
you also have the Midwest Chamber Winds performing. And this is the Presto. So let's give it a listen here on WITT. Jim Walsh here, by the way, in the Wapahani studio. And we're talking to saxophonist and candidate for the Secretary of State here in Indiana, representing the Green Party. And the vote's coming up here in a little while. And if you want to vote for Dr. Wolfe, you must write his name in. He will not be on the ballot, but on the ballot it will say a write-in. Do you want to write in a candidate? And that's where you would enter in his name. And then he would get the vote. Oh, that's lovely. That's music by who is that record? Let's see, that's Walter.
Walter S. Hartley.
Hartley. Do we know a little bit about him?
Yeah, he taught for years at Fredonia University in New York State.
Okay.
He's written a lot of pieces for the saxophone. Very much a friend of the saxophone.
And he has quite a collection of compositions.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, he's a very prolific writer.
Okay.
Very prolific composer and excellent pianist as well. He accompanied me once on one of his pieces.
No, he's not from the Eastman School.
No, Fredonia.
Okay. Oh, Fredonia. You said Fredonia, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Now, again, this is Jim Walsh in the Wapahani studio, WITT, and we're talking to the Green candidate for Indiana Secretary of State, Dr. George Wolfe, with an E. And so if you write in, and even if you forget the E as the write-in, you're still going to get counted.
It still should count, yeah, according to according to the rules.
According to the rules, that's great. Now, Dr. Wolfe, we talked about the Green Party in general, what the party stands for, what their platform is, what they would like to see happen, what they would try to accomplish if they ever get in offices of influence. Mm-hmm. And certainly your office of Secretary of State would have a certain amount of influence in the state.
Right.
And so you have a bit of an agenda there.
Yes. Well, first of all, with respect to the Green Party, an important part of our platform across all candidates and across all states is the idea of sustainability, moving, transitioning our energy use and production from fossil fuels to clean solar, wind, geothermal, and other forms of what we call green energy. Mm-hmm.
Which obviously right now is being put on the back burner, isn't it?
Well, we're moving. We've made a lot of progress on that.
Yeah.
I mean, you go up 65, Route 65, you see a lot of the wind
turbines.
Yeah. You go to the airport, you see solar farms. I've seen them. Ball State University converted their entire campus to geothermal.
Wow.
A few years ago. So, and there's a couple of churches in Muncie that have put solar panels now on their churches and so forth. And
I saw
library, Kennedy Library has solar panels too.
I saw a poster in IKEA just the other night, the one up in Fishers, that I think by I can't remember, it's not a few years from now, all the solar panels that they're putting in on the roof will pretty much run the store.
Yeah. So there's a lot of progress that's been made. We just got to continue that. And there's a business division within the Secretary of State's office in the state of Indiana, and that through that business division, I can do a lot to help promote.
Yeah, well, I know our kids first
businesses which are more prone to wanting to move in that direction.
Okay.
Yeah. But more directly related to the election, the Secretary of State is the chief election officer, and there are many issues now which are being discussed with respect to the role the Secretary of State can play in our elections. And for example, there's been a lot of purging of voter names from the rolls. And
what's that all about?
Well, that's a good question.
Is it because people have moved and they haven't changed their address officially with the voting?
Well, partially because, but you see, I personally think you shouldn't purge someone from the roll or remove a name from the roll unless there's documentation that you're deceased or moved out of state.
Okay.
But the approach has been that if you haven't voted in the last couple elections, and if you didn't return a postcard verifying your address, that you'd be purged from the rolls.
And that's what happens here in the state.
That's what's happened, and we've had around 500,000 names have been purged, and it's
500,000.
That's right, and it's been determined by a judge that 20,000 names were done illegally. By
By
the Secretary of State's office. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's quite a...
Do we know, was that recent?
Well, yeah, that's recent, yeah.
20,000 illegally?
That's right. The judge has ruled that
purged.
20,000 that were purged were done illegally. That's right. And so that's something which is quite a hot issue at the moment, because basically you had to re-register. If your name was purged, you had to check your registration. If it wasn't there, you had to re-register. And in Indiana, you have to register 29 days in advance of the election in order to vote. We don't have same-day registration.
Do some states?
Some states do, yes. In fact, states which have the highest voter turnout have same-day registration. And our voter turnout is quite low. It's in the lower third of all the 50 states. Mm-hmm. So as one of the important...
this may be a call for you.
Yeah.
Is this a call for Dr. Wolfe?
Credit card.
No, it's not.
One of the important goals of my tenure, if I were elected as Secretary of State, would be to dramatically increase voter turnout.
By eliminating these purges.
Well, that's true, but also, I mean, I think the Secretary of State should be an advocate for the voters, and I think you should be... And Secretary should be going out beating the bushes and making sure people...
And this is what you're talking about, making it more of a holiday atmosphere.
Well, that's another thing, too, is that I think Election Day should be a statewide holiday of some form.
Okay.
So that people have time to get to the polls and vote. Our environment is different today. 70 years ago, people lived and worked close to where they voted.
Sure.
But now a lot of people commute. A lot of people in Muncie, for example, live in Indianapolis or Fishers or whatever, and so have an hour commute back and forth.
Yeah,
so they finish their day's work at 5, and they got to drive home to vote. By the time they get home, it's 6 o'clock, and the polls have closed. I mean, things are just different today, and so I think we should have a situation where the employers need to allow people 3 hours at least off on Election Day or more to get to the polls and to vote.
Would you like to see the 6 p.m. closing time extended?
That's another option too.
Yeah.
That's another option too.
But, by the way, Dr. B, let me jump in here. We had talked about taking phone calls, so if anyone has a question for you,
sure.
They may call now. Keep it clean, folks, because we don't have a censor thing going on here. The number's 317-251-3851. Hope it's not another robocall. But the number again, 317-251-3851. If you have a question for Dr. Wolfe about his candidacy and the Green Party in general.
Another issue that's come up is the vulnerability of our voting, electronic voting system. And that's come up, recently because of this tampering that's been discovered by people from other countries trying to influence our election and so forth. So election security is a big, very important issue nowadays. And hackers could even bring down the power grid or something to disrupt an election for relying on these electronic machines. So I think we should be going to a much simpler voting system of paper ballots.
Strictly paper ballots.
Where we vote more and allow people to vote by mail. The state of Oregon has done that for many years, and I have a nephew that lives in Oregon. He's explained the whole process. It's very secure. It can't be hacked, and people. It's very convenient for people because they can get their ballot in the mail and then send it in and so forth. Very easy to verify. There's 3 different ways they can verify the validity of the ballot, and it's much less expensive. This year, the current Secretary of State, Connie Lawson, has spent $7.5 million on election security.
On election security.
Yeah, and it's outrageous that we have to spend that kind of money to sort of maintain this electronic infrastructure when we could go to a simpler system and reduce that cost.
Where you basically have volunteers sitting in a room counting the paper ballots. Yeah.
So that's another position I have. I think it's important we should be moving in that direction.
I say volunteers. I know people do make like $50 a day or some ridiculous low amount. I've done that myself. It's like $17 for a whole day or something.
I also think another hot issue has been the gerrymandering. Or the redistricting that's been going on, partisan redistricting, and I'm for having a citizens commission set up, which is nonpartisan to the redistricting lines, and also begin with an algorithmic model. They have some algorithmic models that can be used that have been developed at MIT and other schools, and you can use those and start with that for a fair map and a fair redistricting map, and then have this commission adjust it accordingly, so to make sure it's accounting for certain demographic shifts that perhaps weren't in the algorithm, and then use that as the basis for our redistricting, rather than the political party which is in power, which always does it to their advantage. Both Democrats and Republicans have been guilty of partisan gerrymandering, and I think the only way to stop that is to elect a Secretary of State which is from outside the two major parties. And that's one of the main reasons.
Otherwise, it's not going to change.
Otherwise, I don't think it's going to change. Mm-hmm.
So, where are we now with that? Is it obviously you and the Green Party feel, the Indiana Green Party feel like the districting is unfair?
Well, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In favor of a certain party.
The people in power in the General Assembly have said, "Oh, this is an important issue," and they made it sound like there's bipartisan support for redistricting reform, but it never seems to happen. It never gets out of the committee because the two major parties don't want to give it up. They don't want to give up the ability to manipulate the process, and that it just continues to have this degree of unfairness as long as that's going on, no matter what political party is in power. So we need someone in the Secretary of State's office that's from outside the two major parties. That's one reason I'm running.
That's probably the only way it's going to get done. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, have we covered all your agenda there, Doctor? Did we?
Well, I think we need to. Oh no, there's another point. We need to encourage more independent candidates, because I think independent candidates is a way of breaking down this highly adversarial, dualistic mentality that we have in this in the electoral process. People are worried about third-party candidates because they think they're going to be spoilers. They're going to take votes away from somebody.
Yeah.
One reason why I'm running for Secretary of State is that the Secretary of State is not someone who votes in the legislature. So I'm not taking if you vote for me, I'm not taking votes away from somebody who actually votes on legislation.
Yeah.
So one thing to keep in mind.
You don't make executive orders or anything like that.
Right. But another thing is another innovation that I think we need, and this is an innovation which was just approved in the state of Maine, and that's what's called ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting, yeah.
Whenever you have...
I've heard about that, especially from Dr. Stein.
Yeah, whenever you have...
But it's a little confusing in my mind still.
Well, whenever you have more than two candidates, okay, when you vote, instead of voting just for one candidate, you rank your vote 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then the candidate which gets the lowest number of votes, if none of the 3 candidates or 4 candidates, however many are running, if nobody gets a majority, you take the lowest person who's scoring lowest in terms of the vote count and drop them out, but take the second and third choices and give them to the remaining candidates. And that, if you continue with that process, what happens is eventually you get a majority winner, and you nullify or eliminate the spoiler effect.
Okay.
I always say that ranked choice voting does for the electoral system what the 3-point shot did for college basketball.
Okay. It's a good analogy.
It opens up the middle.
Yeah.
And it gives the long shot more influence in the game.
Is Maine doing that as a state now?
Maine has approved it in the last election. That's
they
right.
Approved.
Mm-hmm. They approved that.
So they should run it again this year.
That's right. They should be.
Interesting. See how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Are other states? No, other states are doing it.
There are other states in California. They've tried it in certain
other
places,
districts,
but it's catching on. People are just getting familiar with it. But that's definitely something which I would want to make a part of the conversation here in the future, because then people would not feel that there's a spoiler effect from third-party candidates.
Yeah.
And you get more voices being heard in the electoral process, and voters have more choices.
Well, and we certainly would like to open up the debate commission as well.
Yes.
To include more third and fourth party candidates in that. Let's hear another piece of music, and we'll come back and talk about some things that you'd like to see, but you, as the Secretary of State, you wouldn't necessarily have any. You would have influence, but you wouldn't have any power to change things in that regard. But the influence could change things.
Yes, I hope so.
So we got track 8 queued up here, Doctor. That's let's see. Goodbye. The printing here is small. This is the Adagio Vivace by Alain Crepin. Tribute to sax. A tribute to sax. And it's for an alto sax. And you're performing with the Ball State University Wind Ensemble, conducted by Joseph Scagnoli. Okay, let's give that a listen here. Applause indeed for Dr. George Wolfe, along with members of the Ball State, what are we calling these, doctors?
Ball State University Wind Ensemble.
The Wind Ensemble. Yeah, very good. The Allegro Vivace from the Alain Crepin, tribute for sax, for alto saxophone and band. And
I just performed that, by the way, with the excellent high school wind ensemble in Portage, Indiana. One of my students is the conductor there, and he invited me up, and just a couple weeks ago I performed that same piece.
Okay.
Up in northern Indiana, in Portage.
In Portage, yeah. That. So you still perform on a semi-regular basis with different groups? Yeah.
Yes, I perform, and I go to Chautauqua Institution in the summer.
Is that a week?
In New York State. Well, it goes. They have a program which goes 9 weeks.
9 weeks.
I go there. This past year, I was there for 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I performed several times.
Well, as a performer of the Secretary of State office.
I'm sure.
Now, we've gone over some of the things that you can.
See, I tied it in. Last spring, I tied it in because I played a piece with the America's Hometown Band in Muncie, Indiana, and the piece I played was "It's Not Easy Being Green." You know that what Kermit the Frog?
Sure, yeah.
So I spoke a lot about having to get 27,000 signatures and so forth on a petition, and how that was different than Republicans and Democrats. And I said, they make it hard. That's why I'm playing "It's Not Easy Being Green."
Jim Walsh here in the Wapahani studio with Dr. George Wolfe. That's Wolfe with an E. And he is the Green Party candidate for the Secretary of State here in Indiana. And you have to write his name in, so it's not that big a deal. We talked about that earlier. We can mention that again before we sign off here. And I wanted to mention that you're also a saxophone player, obviously, a very accomplished saxophonist. Have you written any music for sax?
I haven't composed. No, I haven't composed any music for saxophone.
Okay. And so do you play any other instrument?
Well, I used to play clarinet, used to play piano, and so forth. But,
okay.
And when you get into higher education and teaching and so forth, you specialize, you see, and so
you're busy.
Don't ask me to play clarinet today.
Won't do that. But we will ask you what kind of influence you would have in what areas as Secretary of State to influence the legislature, to let people know what your ideas are.
Yes, I think, for example, there's a lot of things that connect with business that people don't seem to realize. For example, healthcare. My position is, especially if you see my platform video on my website, my point is that healthcare is good for business.
And the website again is?
Pardon me?
The website again?
WolfeForIndiana.com.
WolfeForIndiana.com. Thanks, Doctor.
And if you go to the place where it says news and click down there, and you'll get platform videos.
Okay.
I have 6 platform videos. One on gerrymandering, one on healthcare, and
on hate crimes, isn't it?
And one on hate crimes. See, now I think the Secretary of State, the business community wants a hate crime bill. The governor now, Holcomb, wants a hate crime bill, and I think I could work with people to get that done.
Let people know the definition of that hate crime bill.
Well, right now, you see, if a crime is committed and the motivation is prejudice or hate, then a hate crime bill gives judges greater discretion in awarding or signing
sentencing.
Sentencing and more stricter sentencing. Right now, for example, if someone sprawls hate graffiti on, say, a church or a Jewish temple or a mosque or whatever, and that's all that's done, just that hateful graffiti. Right now, it's just vandalism.
Wow.
And what kind of sentence can you give vandalism? Well, it's not very stiff. But if the hate crime bill, and the motivation of that clearly would be hate or prejudice.
A felony, a crime.
It would be yes. We could do a lot more in terms of stiffer sentences to discourage and eliminate that. We have to understand in peace education we have 3 definitions of violence. Physical violence, which everybody's familiar with.
Sure.
But there's also psychological violence, which is the violence of hate speech, offensive rhetoric, bullying, intimidation, so forth. And then there is what's called structural violence, and that's the violence of oppression and discrimination. Poverty is a form of structural violence.
Structural violence, okay.
That's when there's a structure that's being imposed upon a certain group of people that happens to disenfranchise them and oppress them or discriminate against them. So you can have structural violence, you can have educational structure, a social structure, religious structure, economic structure that oppresses a certain group of people, and so that's called structural violence, this violence of discrimination.
And so these three areas.
The point is that if you're going to eliminate physical violence has its roots in psychological violence and structural violence.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're just dealing only with the physical violence, you're just dealing with the symptom.
Mm-hmm.
The cause is much deeper than that, and we need to address the psychological domain and the policy domain that often inadvertently can leave people disenfranchised and oppressed.
Okay.
Or discriminated against. Mm-hmm. So that's I think that type of understanding I can bring to the office and also use to defend a hate crime bill.
Okay.
Now, with respect to healthcare, I was mentioning that healthcare is really good for business. I mean, if we keep our workforce healthy, if people get their free vaccines and their wellness exams and so forth on a yearly basis, people will stay healthy, businesses will be more productive, and it's good for business. So I think we tend to separate healthcare from business, but they're connected. They're connected. The workforce needs to stay healthy, so we need a single payer healthcare system, which is more equal across the board, and so everybody can have healthcare. Healthcare is a human right, in my estimation. Healthcare is a human right.
Okay.
It should not be something which you can afford or not afford. And if you don't have it, people going to emergency rooms and that they can't pay the bill, and yet the hospitals have to be paid, so the government winds up paying. It's more expensive in the long run. Not to have universal health care than it is to have it.
Well, also the income and the monetary gain by pharma and the medical industry, medical profession on a private basis is a lot higher percentage than if it was more or less administered by the government.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And so we're one of the only developed nations that doesn't have some form of universal health care. And that's something which I would be very much an advocate for.
Couldn't do anything as Secretary of State, but certainly you could influence.
Well, that's right. I mean,
because
of the business
be a spokesperson
division,
for it.
Because of the business division within the Secretary of State's office. Then that's where the leverage would come from.
Okay.
Then there's also the Secretary of State also oversees auto dealerships, automobile dealerships.
Okay.
And again, in keeping with Green Party values, hybrid vehicles, cars that get more than 30 miles a gallon, so forth on an open road, those encouraging and influencing auto dealers to promote sales of those. And also there's a tax. If you have a hybrid vehicle and you go to register it, you have to pay a higher tax. And that should be lower.
A higher excise tax? Is it the excise tax?
Well, when you go to register, you have to pay a tax on your vehicle, and that affects how much you have to pay for your register.
Is that just in Indiana?
Well, they're different for different states.
Yeah.
So,
but in Indiana,
if you
get a hybrid,
you're paying more when you go to register than you would.
What's the reason
for that? Well, I don't know, but it's wrong. I mean, it should be the opposite. We should be encouraging people to basing the tax that they pay, reducing it so that people with hybrid vehicles or vehicles that get better mileage and are more efficient, they should pay less tax. Not more.
Do you feel like people that own hybrids or electric cars should pay something as opposed to us paying tax at the per gallon? In other words,
that's different than that. That's different. Than
I know it's a different. It's a different angle at that.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't thought about the tax per gallon and so forth. Which pays for not exactly hopefully to maintain the highways. Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
And then the
electric. I don't see how that if it's maintaining the highway, I don't see how that should be any different. But It's the registration that you have to pay when
Yeah.
you go to register the
Okay.
vehicle. If you want to buy a hybrid,
I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that there was
you
higher.
have to
Yeah.
pay more.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so that's, I think it's unfair, and it doesn't encourage people to purchase vehicles that are more energy efficient.
Now you have something here about we have to get out of here pretty soon for the hour, but I wanted to talk about this child welfare agencies because of the opioid drug crisis.
Right.
What influence would you like to have as Secretary of State?
Again, working with the governor, and I would be on the same page in terms of he's making quite a pitch on this opioid crisis, that we have to address the opioid crisis. That it's a healthcare kind of crisis. We shouldn't think of it as a criminal kind of criminalization problem. We should think of it more as a health, because it's destroying families and it's young people and so forth. So and child care. If you're both parties, both husband and wife, are working and they need child care and so forth, what can employers do to help, and business employers do to help with families that have young people, that both couples have to work, families that have children and yet both couples have to work? What can they do to facilitate and help get the kind of child care which is important, especially in the formative years before they start school? That really needs to be addressed.
Well, I hope our listeners have gotten a good feel for what you would represent to the state as Secretary of State, and what your influence would be, and also what your work with businesses would be as far as regulations and concerns. And if people want to get in contact with you again, Doctor, why don't you get that information out?
Sure. Go to my website, wolfforindiana.com, and you can click on contact and email me through the website. And either myself or my communications director on my campaign committee will respond, and be very happy to have that kind of interaction and communication with the voters.
And let our listeners know now how they can vote for you.
Well, you go and you write me, and once you get to the Secretary of State page, there'll be 3 candidates there, and then there'll be a write-in option.
So the Republican, Democrat, and Libertarian.
Yeah, and there'll be a write-in option, and you push the button that says write-in if you're doing an electronic ballot, and then a keyboard will come up on the screen, and you type in my name, and then press record.
And if it's paper,
if it's a paper ballot, you just write it in.
Write it in.
And it's WOLFE.
WOLFE. We're going to get out of here, Doctor, with track number 9, music by, I don't know, by Alessandro Marcello, the Vivace, the third movement from the Concerto in C minor.
Originally for oboe, but I'm playing it on soprano saxophone.
And we have pianist Willie Lefebvre performing with you. And this is your alto, or are we soprano?
It's soprano saxophone, and this again is a live performance at Chautauqua Institution.
Thank you, Doctor, for joining us this day at WITT.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.